Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's episode of Picture This, a show where we go through every Best Picture nominee in the history of Oscars history. And this year, or this month, we are doing 1998, inspired by my birth year because this is my birth month. And I was like, hey, let's throw it back to 1998, the year I was born, the Oscars of 1999. So I was alive for this one. Chad, how you doing?
Well, I'm doing great. I love this year of movies. I thought like all these movies are pretty great in their own ways, to differing levels of my enjoyment. Yeah, I'm excited for these five great ones. Great year.
Yeah.
Great people were born,
I was gonna say
and
some good people were born, but also I feel like it wouldn't be a proper episode, discussing my birth year and discussing such gargantuan films, some that have been called the greatest of this genre or that genre, without a little help. So why don't we bring in our guest for this month? He is over. You can find him over at Take 3. It is Malcolm. Malcolm Lay, how you doing?
I'm doing good. But yeah.
So 1998, we were asking you, like back when we were on one of your shows, asking, what year might you be interested in guesting on? You said, well, what about this month, 1998? So tell us, like, what made it so appealing to you to discuss 1998 in particular?
Well, for me, this is one because I wanted to be there to defend Shakespeare in Love's win because I'm one of those people that think it was deserving of the win. And it's just one of those ones that it's definitely the one that gets shit on a lot because of that. And I don't think it's that it should be.
Yeah.
hell yeah, we'll get there. Trust me.
It's
Malcolm.
interesting because last time we had a guest was Dan, and it was a year where Raging Bull, one of the best films of all time, lost to Ordinary People, and he was there to talk about why that is such a big controversy. Now I feel like we have another guest, and it's another year where people were so divided because there are the people who love Shakespeare in Love, there are the people that love Saving Private Ryan because those were supposedly the two front runners, and this kind of has gone down in history as the biggest Oscar upset for Best Picture of all time. This, along with Crash, along with Ordinary People, along with some other films. So it's cool to have a guest on to talk about this year in particular because I feel like this is so divided just in the community when we talk about this month in particular. Let's just really quickly talk about what these movies are first, if you're tuning in now and don't know. That is Elizabeth, Life is Beautiful, Saving Private Ryan, Shakespeare in Love, and The Thin Red Line. Those are the five films that were nominated for Best Picture in 1998. So, Chad, take it away. Tell us a little bit about the history, and then we'll get into some of our honorable mentions.
Yeah, this time I actually kept it a little bit short but sweet. I said 1998 was designated International Year of the Ocean. Ramzi Youssef got life in prison for planning the first World Trade Center bombing in 1993. 19 European nations banned human cloning. News broke over Bill Clinton's affair. Titanic becomes the first movie to gross $1 billion with a B.
Yeah.
The Belfast or Good Friday Agreement ends most of the violence due to the Troubles, like in Belfast.
The movie.
Windows 98 is released. Google Inc. is founded. A conversation about homophobia in the United States opens after a college student named Matthew Shepard is murdered for being gay. I didn't want to end on a sad note, so then I said my good buddy Dylan Randazzo was born.
That's right. April 17th, 1998, a very significant day for this channel because it was my birthday. Malcolm, were you alive in 1998, or do you have any memory of 1998?
Yeah, I would have been 13 years old in 98.
Okay. Yeah. Any fond memories you could think of from 1998?
I mean, not really, but it's just one of those. I was actually reading up about, like, there wasn't a lot of known people that were born in 98. Strangely enough, like Jaden Smith was born. I think Elle Fanning was born as well. So I mean, but it's weird. It was just going down there. Like people like Mr. Beast, Triple X Tension. I have no idea who they are.
Like a YouTuber or something.
Yeah.
I don't remember too much from that specific year, but I do remember seeing Titanic in the theater, and that was pretty awesome.
Wow. Okay.
But
did
yeah,
you
I
have to cover your eyes for the boobs? Did they cover your eyes?
I think my mom wanted me to, and I might have peeked. I can't remember.
The peek through. Yeah.
But yeah, I just a few births and few deaths. Malcolm is not wrong. I didn't notice a ton, but I had Dylan Randazzo as a birth. Ariel Winter,
Hmm.
Khaled, Elle Fanning, Jaden Smith, and Madison Pettis. I
Yeah,
know
Madison
Dylan
Pettis.
has a
One of my
love for
first
Madison
crushes. One of
Pettis.
my first
Yeah.
crushes, still one to this day.
So
Yeah.
some sad deaths, not many, but we have Sonny Bono.
Mm.
Pol Pot might actually. I'm not even sure. I think that might have been a bad one. Frank Sinatra, Phil Hartman, Bob Kane, and Matthew Shepard, as
Yes.
mentioned earlier.
But yeah, if
Sad.
anyone's interested in the Matthew Shepard story, there's a great play / I think there's a movie of it, The Laramie Project, which is very interesting. You can check that out.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
that's
had no
about
idea.
that scenario.
One of the greatest albums ever made that I wanted to highlight because I love it so much is In the Aeroplane Over the Sea by Milk Hotel. I have it on vinyl, but I couldn't grab it in time. So here's the artwork. If you can see it, it's a beautiful album. Please check that one out. It's actually very appropriate for a lot of these movies because it's about like ghosts in World War II and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Mezzanine by Massive Attack. They have the house theme song on that album. Moon Safari by Air. Aquemini by Outkast. Music Has the Right to Children by Boards of Canada. The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill by Lauryn Hill. XO by Elliott Smith, Ray of Light by Madonna, Deserters Songs by Mercury Rev, and Electroshock Blues by Eels.
Yeah, and now let's get into some of the movies that we think need to be talked about that didn't necessarily make the cut. Malcolm, let's start with you. Any movies from 1998 that you'd like to mention that were egregiously left out of the Best Picture lineup? I know I have some. What do you have on your list?
Yeah, no, there's a few like I mean the obvious ones. I'll get those out of the way first, like Truman Show, Big
Yes,
Lebowski,
yes,
Patch
yes.
Adams. City of Angels is one that I think is really good. Couple some under the radar ones which I didn't think about, but after actually seeing them, I kind of think they should have been in the mix. The 1998 version of Les Mis with Liam Neeson in the lead, and then early Tobey Maguire, Reese Witherspoon movie Pleasantville is a movie I really did enjoy.
Yeah. A few that I have on my list. Obviously, Truman Show is the biggest one. It's in my top 5 all time. I mean, that movie should have been nominated not just for Best Picture, but also Best Actor. I would consider it probably the biggest Best Actor snub of all time. Jim Carrey. I think he is my favorite actor, and it's only fitting that one of my favorite movies of his came out on my birth year, and I love it, and it should be nominated. Like you mentioned, Big Lebowski. A few good animated films, Mulan being a great one, Bug's Life. Rushmore, a Wes Anderson film that I really like. For superheroes, they had Blade. Oh, another animated film, Prince of Egypt. You've Got Mail was that year. Armageddon, not necessarily Best Picture worthy, but like some significant films. You know, Armageddon, Wedding Singer. I was a big fan of Lion King 2, Simba's Pride growing up, and Halloween Town, a Disney Channel original movie that I'm very, very fond of. Chad, did you have any honorable mentions for 1998?
Yes, and I also have some DComs in mind because I was totally Disney Channel kid.
Yes.
I have Half Baked, The Borrowers, The Wedding Singer, great movie. The Big Lebowski, The Man in the Iron Mask, Meet the Needles, My Giant, My Date with the President's Daughter, because I was a big Boy Meets World fan. Godzilla, Almost Heroes, Can't Hardly Wait, Dirty Work, Mulan, The X-Files, Dr. Dolittle, superior to the original, I think at least. Armageddon, Lethal Weapon 4, Small Soldiers, There's Something About Mary, Mafia, The Parent Trap, Halloween H2O 20 years later, Blade, Brink, there's a decom, Simon Birch, Rush Hour, Casper Meets Wendy, Urban Legend, Ants, Night at the Roxbury, Bride of Chucky, Halloween Town, The Waterboy, Billboard Dad, I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, I'll Be Home for Christmas, The Rugrats Movie, A Bug's Life, Babe Pig in the City, Jack Frost, Star Trek Insurrection, You've Got Mail, The Faculty, and here are my Best Picture worthy: The Truman Show, Rushmore, Gods and Monsters, American History X, and A Simple Plan.
Yeah, I mean, just listening to Chad's list, if they had the best animated feature in 98, you would have had like Rugrats in Paris, Prince of Egypt, Mulan.
It would have been a good category, yeah.
It really would have. I don't know what would have won, because all 3 of those are really good.
Yeah, I feel like Disney would have gotten the upper hand, but then again, Prince of Egypt did win Best Song for When You Believe, so maybe it would have been Prince of Egypt. Who knows? So moving on now, let's actually talk about the ceremony. This is obviously the ceremony held in 1998, not 1999 rather than 1998. It was hosted in the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion in LA. and it was hosted by Whoopi Goldberg. This was her third time hosting.
Fun.
There were some pre-show hosts because for the first time ever, this was the first year of the pre-show, meaning the red carpet was actually televised as its own recorded episode series thing that you could watch, or special thing that you could watch before the Oscars. It was the first year of that, so that was very significant. When talking about the actual Oscars, there weren't any huge moments. There was a really, really famous one, though, of Roberto Benigni standing on the chairs and walking across the chairs to accept his Oscar. That's a famous clip
Of
that
course
people
he
like to
would.
talk about. But the big news was, of course, the Best Picture win. It was Shakespeare in Love beating Saving Private Ryan, which was considered and is still considered by many to be the biggest snub of all time, the biggest upset of all time, whatever you want to classify it, whether it was Saving Private Ryan being snubbed, Shakespeare in Love upsetting, or, just a combination of both, whatever you want to classify it. But going into the night, Elizabeth didn't really have a shot. It was nominated everywhere but PGA. Thin Red Line also didn't really have a shot. It was nominated Critics' Choice, but not nominated anywhere else, which was honestly pretty surprising. But maybe it just wasn't everyone's cup of tea. Life is Beautiful was nominated at the Critics' Choice and the BAFTA. It ended up winning International Film at both, but it was snubbed at the Golden Globes and only nominated at PGAs. But it really was the other two films that were getting some trophies along Oscar season. Shakespeare in Love nominated for everything, won the Golden Globe alongside Saving Private Ryan. Saving Private Ryan won drama. Shakespeare in Love won musical comedy. The Critics' Choice went to Saving Private Ryan, as well as the PGA, which went to Saving Private Ryan. But then the BAFTA came through and gave it to Shakespeare in Love, which was kind of the first inkling that, maybe Shakespeare in Love can pull off this upset. We've seen, especially in recent years, sometimes the late game swingers, the ones who win some of the later awards, are the ones who kind of gain that momentum in the end. This is very much a case of that, where Saving Private Ryan was winning everything and then lost the BAFTA to Shakespeare in Love. So that could have been an indication, but it was still the favorite, Saving Private Ryan, going into the night. So we will talk about that upset when we get to those two films. But we're going to start with the first film, and that is the kind of star-making turn for Cate Blanchett, and that is 1998's Elizabeth. Chad, tell us about Elizabeth.
Absolutely. Elizabeth, directed by Shekhar Kapoor, written by Michael Hirsch, cinematography by Remy Adefarasin, music by David Hirschfelder, starring Cate Blanchett, Jeffrey Rush, Joseph Fiennes, Richard Attenborough, Christopher Eccleston, Kathy Burke, Fanny Ardant, Vincent Castle, Eric Cantona, Emily Mortimer, Kelly MacDonald, John Gielgud, and Daniel Craig.
Yeah.
Synopsis. The early years of the reign of Elizabeth, who inherits a struggling England, is faced with death threats and establishes herself as queen.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very dark story. I didn't expect it to be as dark as it was. You see sometimes like a costume period drama, and you see this slate especially is very much either your old school British kind of costume dramas or your war films. Like there's really nothing that kind of branches out from those boxes. That's very much the audience they're catering to, and this is not my kind of movie. So I'm very interested to hear what Chad and Malcolm, you guys think of this movie, because it is a much darker story than some of the other more like fanciful costume dramas that you might see, like a Pride and Prejudice, anything like Jane Austen. This is not that. It's a little darker, a little grislier. So we'll start with you, Malcolm. Like, what did you think of Elizabeth? Was this a first time watch for you? Had you seen this before?
This was a first time watch. I mean, I'd thought I'd seen it sometime before, but I'd actually just finished watching it like 10 or so minutes before we went live. But I saw at the library they had a double DVD set of both this one and the sequel. Haven't seen the sequel yet.
And supposedly there might be a third one on the way, maybe chronicling her later life, which I know was kind of buried after it was announced, but like it might be on the back burner someday. But I think it's interesting that they're kind of going along her life as Cate Blanchett herself gets older too.
Oh yeah, because I mean, the sequel is basically Mary Queen Scott's. But that being said, I really enjoyed this one. I mean, this is like, this is one of those ones that that I've heard a lot about, but just was always curious to actually finally sit down and watch, and this is just great. Like, I'm a big fan when it comes to period dramas and all that, because I find them all just beautiful looking.
Yeah,
and Cate Blanchett definitely deserved to be nominated for this. She probably should have won, but but that being said, it was just a great movie. The whole cast was fantastic. And yeah,
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, like you say, you really, really love period pieces. I'm kind of the opposite. I find them a little bit slower, a little bit boring, but if done well, if acted well, if designed well, and I think you bring up a good point. You know, the design of this movie is just gorgeous. I mean, it wins one of the big design awards, but I mean, everything just sets, costumes, makeup, it's all beautiful. But I think that can make or break a period drama to make it something more than just, it was okay. It was just kind of this boring historical piece. And I know they did take some historical liberties with the actual source material. They did, exaggerate and dramatize a lot, but I think that's kind of needed in a movie like this to get other people invested, like myself, who isn't necessarily, you know, this isn't my favorite genre, but I like how they kind of, made it a little darker, gave it a little bit more drama to make it more appealing, almost like a Game of Thrones before Game of Thrones, without the
Yeah.
violence of the like dragons and the White Walkers and stuff, but just like the family politics and the way people backstab each other and the different
Mhm.
families and who's lying to who's backstabbing who. It's interesting how it kind of set that groundwork. Chad, what did you think of this one?
Oh man, could you imagine if they freaking like George Lucas some White Walkers into Elizabeth? That would be very interesting if they did that. Yeah, this was also my first Elizabeth watch, and I quite enjoyed it. I'm on the same wavelength as you, Dill. It's kind of like, yeah, if it's done super well, or if like a big director name is attached to it or something like that, and then I see, that they have a certain spin on it, then I can probably enjoy it a lot more. It just really depends. I can't like name off the top of my head a lot of big lavish costume dramas that I really love or anything, but I think I enjoy them for the most part. This one in
Mhm,
particular, I liked it enough. I wouldn't put it up there as like a great film, but I did really enjoy Kate Blanchett's performance. I think Malcolm had a point there about her
mhm,
performance, and I love her arc. I think she has a really great arc in the movie, where she starts out really, over here, where she starts out really, kind of like on trial, and you're like, just because of her religion or, politics about, her sister, and I don't know, all this stuff.
mhm,
I don't really know what the hell's going on, but they were mad about something. They were like going to kill her. And then
mhm,
she goes on to be queen. She inherits all this, stuff. And she's like, no, I'm going to take advantage of this. I'm going to rise above and I'm going to actually, try to fix this. And then she has everybody coming against her. I also really liked that, and it was before, I really liked Christopher Eccleston as kind of like a bad
mhm.
guy, because I
Yeah,
just know him mostly as the Doctor from Doctor Who. As
and that's funny
in, I'm
because I
just
don't
like,
know him. I don't know him from Doctor Who, so I know him as the bad guy in Thor: The Dark World. So it's
there
interesting
you
because
go,
like you're seeing a
exactly.
different side of him, and I'm seeing a much more toned down villain side of him, and that's what's really
Yeah,
interesting. I mean, this
he's
whole
he's
cast, yeah.
actually really fun in Doctor Who. So
Mhm.
seeing him in this was kind of interesting, and Daniel Craig too. So James Bond's kind of like a bad guy in that as
Yeah.
well. A
And
lot of
and
people are
Joseph
bad
Fiennes.
guys, but
Joseph Fiennes, who we see is in 2 of these movies. It's honestly
exactly, yeah,
kind of bewildering to me that, like, his brother, who is great, but his brother's the one who, like, kinda takes off. His brother's the
yeah.
Harry Potter villain, but he is, kinda just this was kinda his
The
year, and then after
Schindler's
that,
List villain.
I haven't seen a ton of him afterwards. I mean, yeah, like, Ray Fiennes was big with Schindler's List, of course, and
Yeah,
English Patient also before this, but again, like, I would have thought he would have been just as big a star too, is what I'm saying.
yeah,
Like, I really do think he has a great charisma. Do I love his character in this? No, because I don't think you're supposed to. But I
yeah,
did find him at least to be a good acting presence. Like I enjoyed to see his performance, and I
yeah.
like to see the dynamic. That one scene where he's like making out with Kelly McDonald's character, and she's
Mhm.
wearing the poison dress, and she just starts like shrieking and
Oh,
getting covered in blood. And I'm like, this is really dark. Like I don't know
I
how
didn't know what was going on
historically
until later. I
accurate
was
it
like, what?
was, but like I really do think those liberties. I think sometimes you have to take liberties, and we'll talk about Shakespeare in Love, how it's definitely
Yeah,
more fictionalized than nonfiction, but that's okay, I
yeah.
think, because you're trying to tell history, but you're also trying to make it appealing to an audience. Yeah,
Yeah, that
and yeah,
dress part, I was like, God damn, like you can poison a dress, like that's
yeah,
insane. But
yeah,
yeah, I love Kate Blanchett's arc. I love how it ends, and then she's like, just kind of badass at the end, and just like taking no prisoners and just punishing everybody. And I'm like, this is intense. And yeah, exactly. Game of Thrones is like a very good comparison to people's heads on spikes and stuff like that. It's a
yes,
very brutal film, but
yeah,
yeah, I enjoyed it for the most part, I think.
yeah.
Yeah, just looking at Joseph Fiennes' filmography, like he hasn't been in a lot of big movies
No, it's
since.
surprising.
Like
Yeah.
I think the bigger ones he's been in, like he was in Enemy at the Gates, he was in the 2014
Right.
Hercules with The Rock, and then he was in that Risen playing Clavius, the biblical
Mhm.
Mhm.
one with
Interesting.
He's a
Tom
good
Felton.
actor. I don't understand. I like
Yeah,
him in both of these.
Yeah.
apparently he's going to be in a movie, The Mother, coming out this year at some stage.
The
Oh, I'll go
Mother
check
with
it
an
out.
exclamation point. Okay.
No, it's just called The Mother. It's got Nicky
Aronofsky
Caro,
attached.
J Lo, Gail Garcia Bernal. So,
Oh, okay. Pretty big cast then. Yeah, that's
yeah.
interesting. I'll have to check that out. All right, so Elizabeth nominated for 7 Academy Awards. It only wins 1, but I think it is deserving. It wins Best Makeup, but it's also nominated for Best Picture, Best Actress, of course, for Kate Blanchett, Best Art Direction, which now is Production Design, Best Cinematography, Best Costume Design, and Best Original Score. So Elizabeth's life was anything but glamorous, anything but beautiful. But let's talk about another story that is somewhat more beautiful, or maybe it's not. Maybe it's a little darker. Maybe it is a pretty solemn, sad movie. But maybe there are some glimmers of hope. But anyway, the title of the film is Life is Beautiful. So let's talk about Life is Beautiful.
Still, why can't it be both?
Well,
Life
maybe
is
you can.
Beautiful, directed by, I'm going to get one in there, Roberto Benigni, written by Roberto Benigni and
Ugh.
Vincenzo Cerami, cinematography by Tonino Deli Colli, music by Nicola Piovani. Did that hurt, Del? I'm sorry.
No, that's
Starring
okay.
Roberto Benigni, Nicoletta Braschi, Giorgio Cantarini, uh, Giustino Durano, Horst Buchholz, and Marisa Paredes.
There you go.
Synopsis: a Jewish man falls in love with a princess during the Holocaust, has a son, and, after taken to a concentration camp, pretends it's all an elaborate game he planned to surprise his son. Think I'm
Yeah.
making that synopsis up? I am not. That's
And
what it's about.
and that's the thing is like the synopsis, if you hear it, you're like, that is not a, like you're making a comedy set in the Holocaust. Like you're making this movie about this guy making a game out of the Holocaust for his kid. It does not work on paper. So the fact that when you
No.
watch this, it can get the emotion out of you, and it can actually like, you know, be this heartwarming story that is very funny in times, but also very, very depressing and sad, and towing that line well. Like when I heard the synopsis when I first saw this, I was like, I don't know about this. But then I watched it and I was like,
Right.
oh, okay. Because I think people also hear it's the Holocaust movie, and the Holocaust doesn't come in for maybe 45, 50 minutes in. Like the whole first chunk is his romance, his love story with Principessa. Like it's his
Prince
whole,
of Baez.
it's the whole backstory. I don't even like to call it backstory because it is so crucial to just the main plot, because this is a love story at the end of the day. Love story between man and wife, and man and child. Above all else, it's a Holocaust movie second, I'd like to say, and a love story first, and just a love for Italy and the people and the culture of Jewish Italians and their lifestyle, and it gives me kind of It's a Wonderful Life vibes in the way that like it starts as this like kind of just like exploration of a character's life. You kind of see his routine, you see his relationships, you see just a sense of this character and who he is, and then at the end you see when they are pushed to their darkest, what happens, and like that's kind of the crux of what people remember about the movie. But I think this whole first half is really integral too. But I've rambled on enough about it. Malcolm, what is your thought on Life is Beautiful, or La Vita è Bella, if we're gonna call it by its Italian
Ooh,
title?
ooh.
Yeah,
What
this
is it?
is this this is one that I I started watching the other day actually. Then it's just one that I remember that I did actually watch it once a while ago, but it's just one of those ones that, even though I've still refreshed my memory when I watched it, I still don't remember anything about it. Um, it's fine. I honestly don't get why there was so much love for this. And talk about someone who actually fell off a lot since this. Roberto
Mhm.
Benigni hasn't been in it a lot since this movie. He's
Yeah.
been in about 2 Pinocchio movies, one arguably good, the other one most people forgot about when it came out.
Yeah. It's
Um,
interesting because like all these people from 1998, it's like this is the cursed year where like if you were in 1998 films, you either made it huge like Tom Hanks, or you like fell off like Joseph Fiennes, or like Roberto Benigni.
It is true what Malcolm said about Roberto Benigni just basically kind of falling off, which is really sad because I know that like a lot of his later films, people are like, laughably bad. Apparently, like I saw the Pinocchio and stuff like that. Just not really that great, but like you would never know it if you just watch Life is Beautiful, because I think this movie is a great film. Every single time we watch it, I've only seen it twice, but like when we were about to watch it again, the wife was like, do we have to? Not because she doesn't like it, but because the ending is so sad that like she just like it gets to her every time, and me as well, because it's just so well done. I do love how the first half of it is that love story, because it really develops the characters, that relationship, not just between him and but Jonah Principessa, but also the child, and you get to see like his hatred for baths, which comes up later, his knack for hiding, which definitely comes up later.
Yeah.
Just stuff like that.
It's
Just
like
like
the
really
Easter eggs
cool.
are planted earlier. It's like a Chekhov's gun. It's like they come back to play later, and you don't realize early on that they are important details. Yeah.
And then when they do come up later, you're like, oh, okay, all right, so that they were important. It's a very funny movie, which I think is just so rare in a Holocaust film. Like
Right.
exactly like you
And
said. Like
and
it's
honestly, it's probably better to not, try to make a comedy about the Holocaust, because 9 times out of 10, you're going to make something that's either offensive or like
offensive.
an
Yeah.
unironically satirical. But I think here it's like he actually understood to let those darker moments still be present, but just not make them present for the kid. Like when we're seeing it from the kid's point of view, it is light, it is more comedic, but we do still see why it is such a horrible event, and why there's this outer layer of smiling, but inside there is this pain in Guido. And I think that's important, is to have those darker moments to offset, because if it was all just the game, if it was all the kid's point of view,
Yeah.
this is kind of one of the criticisms I had with Belfast, is that like we got it all from the kid's point of view, so it all seemed a little more light. But here, because I think we're getting it from the adult's point of view and the kid's point of view, it's an interesting perspective of that lighter stuff and the darker stuff. Like I like how it kind of shifts perspective, and we get some of the wife's perspective as well, because she's totally secluded from this group, and I almost feel even worse for her, because I mean, at least the two of them have each other. She has no one, and it's also heartbreaking to see that as well.
Well, she also volunteered to go, so I don't.
Right, but again, they don't
Some of
know
those
what they're getting
things.
into necessarily.
That's
either,
true. Exactly.
They didn't know what they were signing up for.
A lot of the times, there is a duality here. You have the sadness, and you have movies like Come and Look, or Come and See, or whatever
Come and
that
See,
one.
yeah.
Come and See movie. You have ones that are so, I haven't seen that one, but deep.
With Schindler's List,
and Schindler's List, and just deep and like hard to watch, and you're just like, okay, yeah, I get it. It's so hard to watch. But I feel like with the comedy, like you said, you have this lightness that blends in, because it's two halves of the same coin. Like when like doctors deal with death all the time, but they end up joking with their camaraderie, at the hospital. They might have like a dark kind of sense of humor, because that's what gets them through the day. And I feel like that's exactly what, this distraction that he does for his kid is just so brilliant. I just love the scene, because you're just sitting there like, this is so dark, but this is hilarious too. Like the both sides. And then like when he's next to the Nazi guy or whatever, and he's like telling them the rules and what's going to happen and stuff.
Yeah.
And he's like, these are the rules of the game. And he's just like, I just love all of that. I think it's so good.
Yeah.
But then when you do get to these shots that linger, like the shots of the mountain of bodies, and just like you hear the little boy saying, oh, they want me to go take a bath with all the other kids, and he's like, go take your bath. And then you're like, oh
and
my
you as the
God.
audience knows like that the bath means death, so you're almost glad that this kid doesn't like to take showers. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And you're like, don't take your bath. And it just gets really dark. But you have to go that route with the Holocaust film.
And even in the end,
and
like this is a Holocaust film, but it has a happy ending, because this kid does win the game. He gets his tank, but also there is that sadness knowing that everyone else is in on something completely different than he is. And it's like a very, very bittersweet, like this is the epitome of a bittersweet film. And I think for some people, the sweetness, they're like, we can't have sweetness in a Holocaust film, which honestly, if that is what you believe, I agree. Like if you want to watch a Holocaust film to feel the deepness and the darkness and like not have anything distract from that, sure. But also if you like it for the sweetness, but don't like the darkness, I get that too, because it is tough to watch at times. Like it is a very interesting line to toe. Malcolm, is there any specific reason why it's not your thing, or just didn't really click with you?
I mean, it's one of those ones, like when it comes to foreign films, as when like, I'm just not that big on them too. Sometimes it takes a review that I connect with, but like for me, when it comes to foreign films in general, I like them if I can sort of lose myself in the movie and not worry about the subtitles. This is the one I felt
Right.
like I had to read the subtitles
Sure,
just
yeah.
to understand it. There's things
Mhm.
like The Worst Person in the World and Parasite, which are two foreign films that I did really connect to. Like I could feel I could lose myself in those and not
Right.
read the subtitles.
Mhm.
Sometimes
Yeah, no,
that just
that's
happens.
a
Yeah.
fair argument too. But anyway, I am a big fan of this film. I know Chad, you
Same.
are as well. Like, I think this is one of I wouldn't say it's the best example of a movie to watch if you want to get an understanding of the Holocaust, but I do think it is like a good movie to watch if you're looking to just like see every little aspect of the personal human experience in that event. I think this does capture a very interesting little pocket, especially for Italian Jews, because usually the movies that we see are featured on like Polish Jews or German, people in Germany or Poland. Like Italy is not always showcased in films like this. So
Just don't do a double feature of this and Schindler's List unless you want to be really depressed.
No,
yeah,
don't do that.
yeah. It's not that uplifting enough to offset that.
One more thing, I just wanted to add, I just freaking love Roberto Benigni's physical comedy in this
Mhm.
movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's so
Like the
great.
little winks he gives the kid, and so much so that like when he
Yeah.
does do that wink at the end, the kid's
And
cracking up, but like your heart's breaking because it's like inside
Mhm.
he knows, like he knows he's done.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's what's tough is like you it's always interesting to see when a character knows something that they're not letting on to the other characters, and seeing exactly what they decide to show or decide to hide from the audience. I think it's a brilliant performance. I do get why some people think it's a little overly hammy, but I think that's his style, and that's probably why he
Yeah.
hasn't resonated with every film he's done, because it only works in particular scenarios, I think. Life is Beautiful, also nominated for 7 Oscars, wins 3 of them. It wins Best Music, Original Dramatic Score. It wins Best Foreign Language Film, which is now international film, but it won for Italy, the country of Italy, and it won Best Actor for Roberto Benigni. He did not win Best Director, but he was nominated. It was also nominated for Best Picture, Best Original Screenplay, and Best Film Editing. So you could say he saved his child's life, but let's save another person. Why don't we? Well, why don't we save Private Ryan? Let's move on now, Chad, to Saving Private Ryan. Tell us about it.
Just make sure you find the right one, okay?
Yeah, oh my
Saving
gosh.
Private Ryan, directed by Steven Spielberg, written by Robert Rodat, cinematography by Janis Kaminsky, music by the great John Williams, starring Tom Hanks, Edward Burns, Matt Damon, Harrison Young, Tom Sizemore, Jeremy Davies, Vin Diesel, I am Groot, Adam Goldberg, Barry Pepper, Giovanna Ribisi, Dennis Farina, Ted Danson, Bryan Cranston, one-armed Bryan Cranston, Nathan Fillion, Paul Giamatti, Ryan Hurst, and more. Synopsis: a group of soldiers are assigned to rescue a private named Ryan because all of his brothers died in World War II.
It's dark. Yes, World War II. This is the second of 3 World War II films that we'll talk about today. And yeah, it's crazy that he grew that arm back in time for Breaking Bad. I guess enough time had passed.
Malcolm in the Middle,
so-
too.
Yes. Speaking of, Malcolm, you're in the middle here. Let us know what your thoughts are on Saving Private Ryan, and we can kind of segue into the Shakespeare in Love debate. But let's talk about this movie first, and then we can kind of get into the debate of the Oscar campaigning and all that jazz, and how this movie was the frontrunner and lost and all that jazz.
Yeah, Saving Private Ryan is one of those movies that like when it comes to war movies, I'm not the person who would always go to watch a war movie willingly. I mean, I'll watch it if I'm doing something for either Rankum or something like that. But it's just not my bag. And it's one of those ones that when it comes to war movies, they're always either about World War One or World War Two. I mean, not a lot of the other wars don't really get a look in. But like this movie, I thought it was good. It's just one that I didn't really connect with the characters much. It's just one of those ones that there's a point where it's like I was watching, it's like I really don't care if they find save Private Ryan or not. It's just it was a little bit shorter than maybe, but it's just a quite long movies, and it's just one of those ones that I felt the length of the movie. I'm not sure if it was almost 3 hours, but it felt longer than 3 hours. It's just one of those ones that dragged to the point where it's like it just felt like it was just getting too long and just dragging on for the sake of dragging on.
Yeah, I see what you mean about the whole Private Ryan thing. Like, you don't care if they get to them or not. They're trying to save Private Ryan, and the stakes are Ryan's, but we don't see Ryan till way into the movie, so it's hard to like understand why they're doing this specific mission. I get it because they were told to. That's as simple as it is when it comes to war. You do what you're told, but it's also like I wish we got something with Ryan beforehand. I know we get glimpses of him older, but I wish we had something with Ryan to understand why saving him is so crucial and why we should care about Ryan, why they need to get to Ryan. I think that's one aspect that I think does hold the film back. Now, stylistically, I think one of the best just constructed war films for sure. Like that opening sequence. I mean, people have talked about it forever, so I'm not going to talk about it too much. But that opening D-Day sequence is one of the best put on screen, put on film. I mean, like Steven Spielberg really understands how to get into the little details and nooks and crannies and not looking at things from an outside perspective, but looking at it from the inside out and really getting that idea of like, yeah, all these characters that you're seeing on the boat. Oh, are these going to be our main characters? Oh, nope, they're all dead. Okay, because that's war. And, the people that you've spent all this time with that you think, oh, these are our main cast of characters. Like, these are my best friends. They could all be gone in the next second. And I think that's something that this film understands well. And we'll talk about another war film later that I also think does this well, where like, you can't really have too many main characters because war, so everyone's expendable, everyone's vulnerable, everyone's almost at an even playing field. There's no advantage you really have in war unless you are like a medic hanging out back at the base camp or something. Like everyone is on an equal playing field. I think this film does that well. I like how you have Tom Hanks as like that kind of focal point to kind of like drive the narrative, like that main character that you can kind of attach yourself to. And but I think the supporting cast is good. I think Vin Diesel, this is probably his best performance, I think, because he's kind of gone into a different path in terms of like stewing away from dramatic work and going into more action heavy work. I like seeing him in a more dramatic role like this. Giovanni Ribisi is incredible in this. I love him in this as well. Like I think this is really well acted. I just think the overall story of Saving Private Ryan, I've always kind of felt like, like why is this like why is this the story? Like why is it about them saving this one guy that we don't really know well? Like I wish it was more about something else, but again, like I don't know. This is the story they're telling. It's just this particular story, some of those details I didn't necessarily feel as connected to. And I agree with you. But the filmmaking, I mean, I'm a Steven Spielberg stan. He's my favorite director. So obviously I was, oohing and ahhing watching this, watching all the details of the spectacle of it. For sure. Chad, what are your thoughts on Saving Private Ryan?
This one has evolved for me, or maybe devolved a little bit for me
Okay.
over the years. It's the one I've seen the most, because
Right.
it's like a great Spielberg movie. I'm gonna watch
Yeah.
it, more than once, and definitely had to rewatch it for this just to see how I felt, because I know the Saving Private Ryan, Shakespeare in Love was going to come up a lot, and so I'm like, all right, how do I actually feel about these two movies and the other movies? This one I think is definitely great in a sense, and I mirror both of what you guys have said a lot. I love the performances quite a bit. I think everyone is like, doing super great. Well, most people. But it's weird because everybody has this misnomer where they say that the D-Day sequence is the opening sequence. It is not. If it was, I think this movie would be way better than it is. I
Okay.
hate the opening and closing shot of the American flag, the shot of the old man.
Old
I
Ryan.
think that's one of the cringiest uh, endings of all time,
Wow.
when the man's like, I was a good man, right? Tell me I'm a good man. And I'm like, no, this is fucking laughable for me.
Mm.
And I'm sorry. No
No, yeah.
disrespect to anybody who fought in that war, any military people. I know it's like a shot of the graveyard and it's important and impactful, but I just feel like that one kind of takes away. And I also really dislike the messaging this time a little bit, where
Yeah.
it's weird. Like it's like they spend all this time trying to find this guy Ryan. They find Nathan Fillion instead. He's the wrong Ryan. They find the real Ryan, and then I think a lot of those scenes are great. When Matt Damon comes out and he's like, why do I have to go? I'm just like everyone else, and then he tells this brilliant, I think, ad-lib story about his brothers and the last time he saw them. Some of these moments and monologues and points in the film with the characters, I think, are brilliant. I love some of these scenes. I think Matt Damon is great in it. But then it's weird because like you get the part where Tom Hanks dies and then he tells Ryan to earn this, like earn my death. Like I died for you. I
Mhm.
think that's an incredibly shitty thing to put on somebody for the
True.
rest of their life.
Mhm.
Like, I did this for you. And it's like, he
Right.
never asked you to do that for him.
Right.
He even said when you came to collect him that he didn't want to go. He wants to stay here and fight with everybody because he's just as good as everybody else and equal to everybody and no better than anyone else.
Yeah.
He's not going to go home.
Mhm.
And I've like, he did earn it. He fought with you and he stayed by your side.
Right.
And I don't like some of the choices that were made in
That's
that.
fair. Yeah.
So there's the
Yeah.
unevenness
Can I jump
of
in
it.
on that point too?
Yeah, sure,
I
go
think
ahead.
that opening scene is kind of like where you're trying to understand, oh, this is Ryan, and this is why it's important that we're saving him. I think it would have been more impactful to show a scene, maybe open the movie with a scene of Ryan and his brothers at the age of Matt Damon. Show a scene of him and his brothers, so we understand that, and then go to D-Day, and then go to
That's a good point.
that his
I like
brothers
that.
missing. Because I think when you open with him older, A, you know they find him and you know he survives, and B, you just don't get enough of him in that moment to where like the whole movie, them trying to save him, the stakes just aren't there because I think we just
Yeah.
don't know this Ryan guy. I know Matt Damon, and I can't wait to see Matt Damon, but it's not like when we see Ryan, I'm like, thank God they found him. Because and I
Right.
get it's more about the journey than the destination, but then when you're trying to make so much of it Ryan and his perspective in the beginning and the end and make him like the big central figure and he's the titular role and all that stuff, like you kind of have to make him a bigger presence or give him at least a little bit
Yeah.
more stakes and weight. And I get it, like it's hard because this is the story they're telling. So like, how can you make Ryan a bigger character when they haven't found him? That's the whole point. But I think it's hard when it's an actual person they have to find rather than an object or a thing or an idea or anything that's not, personified or breathing. Like it's very tough.
Yeah.
I think in that facet. So I agree with you. I think there should have been a different way to open the movie. Either open in D-Day, or if you want
Mhm.
us to kind of know Ryan a little bit before the movie starts, give us a scene with him and his brothers, because then we can understand why it's so crucial that we're gonna get him and bring him home. Like why does it matter so much that he is brought home? Because I'm sure everyone else lost people in the war. I'm sure a lot of other parents lost all their kids or some of their kids in the war. I always struggle with the idea of like, why is this particular instance crucial compared to so many others?
Yeah.
Chad, you were going to continue though.
Yeah, not for much longer. I just also wanted to say that, it just seems like the messaging of the movie about war, like I know they're facing Nazis. This is different than a movie that we'll talk later that facing actual Nazis here. So I know that you're like, well, this is a hard line. We're doing the right thing. But I have the opinion that war is
Yeah.
never right. And I don't think they did like a good enough job of saying that this isn't the correct thing. It seems almost like with the whole, like I know they're trying to like honor people who fought and stuff like that. I get it, but like when you end with like American flag and it's like very Michael Bay, and I'm like, why? Like, what messaging are you saying? Are you saying war is bad? These people shouldn't have died? Are you saying that it was a good thing that all those people died because you couldn't have tried diplomacy instead of sending all these people to war and making bad decisions? I don't know. Sorry, I'm very
It's interesting.
critical
No,
about this
no,
stuff.
it's fine, and I think it's important to be critical because this is hailed as one of the greatest war films of all time, and you have to understand why. And I think design wise and conceptually, directorially, it's very obvious. But in
Amazing.
terms of like should it stand the test of time as one of the greatest, especially when we have two other World War II films we're talking about today, and one other film that people have said is the most undeserving Best Picture winner of all time. I mean, Saving Private Ryan is going up against three other films that have been very closely compared to it. I think Elizabeth kind of gets off a little bit, you know, free because she doesn't really fit into the category of the movie didn't beat Saving Private Ryan, and it's also not necessarily a World War II film, so it doesn't really necessarily have to compete directly with it. But I think that's the thing when it happens, especially when it is hyped up so much. You're gonna have people who discover it later in life. I discovered this for the first time last year. We all probably discovered this a little later maybe than it came out, and I think that also has to do with it. The public perception of when it's put on a pedestal, how does that change things, and vice versa, which we'll get into in just a second with Shakespeare in Love. When it's been put so down, maybe you watch something and you can pick it back up. So are there any other thoughts on this, or should we go on to Shakespeare in Love? Because I want to get into this debate. Saving Private Ryan, up for 11 Oscars, wins 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them, wins 5 of them. Those awards are Best Director for Steven Spielberg, Best Cinematography for Janusz Kaminski, Best Film Editing for Michael Kahn, Best Sound, and Best Sound Editing. So, and the ones it's nominated for but doesn't win is obviously Best Actor in a Leading Role, Tom Hanks, Best Screenplay written for original screenplay, Best Art Direction, Best makeup, Best Original Score for John Williams, and the big one, Best Picture, which now segues us just
Mhm.
very naturally to Shakespeare in Love, which did win Best Picture. So, Chad, tell us about Shakespeare in Love, and then I can't wait to have this discussion of what we thought should have won, because I have a feeling we might all be on the same page. Chad, tell us.
Shakespeare in Love, directed by John Madden. Yes, the football guy. No, it's like it wasn't the football guy. Written by Mark Norman and Tom Stoppard. Cinematography by Richard Greatrex. Music by Stephen Warbeck. Starring Joseph Fiennes again, Gwyneth Paltrow, Jeffrey Rush again, Colin Firth, Ben Affleck. Ben Affleck was in this. Judi Dench, Simon Callow, Jim Carter, Martin Clunes, Anthony Sher, Imelda Staunton, yes, Dolores Umbridge herself, Tom Wilkinson, Mark Williams, yes, Arthur Weasley himself, and more. Synopsis: a love affair involving a writer and the daughter of a wealthy merchant happens while the writer writes Romeo and Juliet.
We have to address the elephant in the room. Shakespeare in Love versus Saving Private Ryan. It's time to talk about it. Let's talk about whether we thought this should have beat Saving Private Ryan, and then we can segue into our reasons why and talk about the film that way. When I first watched these films, I would have probably picked Saving Private Ryan, but watching it again, I think I enjoy coming back to this one more. Now, it's a tough question because Best Picture, it's like you want to award the thing that just hits all the boxes well. Saving Private Ryan is probably more technically impressive. This is much more my speed, so it's very hard. But you also have to remember, Best Picture, even if it's not the most like technically advanced, it's just a good representation of the Academy and their feelings at that time. And I think if I were voting, I would have voted for this over that, because I think this one just speaks to me more as a theater person, as a Shakespeare fan, as someone who loves a good rom-com, but also appreciates the period piece and the beautiful costumes and sets. The acting is phenomenal. Yes, one performer won an Oscar for only like 10 minutes of screen time, but it's still a great performance. It's a great leading performance. It's a great leading actor, actress. I think this has a lot of merit. It's not you're not putting forth the most accurate depiction of a D-Day scene ever put to screen, as some vets have said. Like they say, Saving Private Ryan's the most authentic representation of that sequence and how terrifying it was. Sure, this film's not going to get that, but this is a totally different breed of film, and I think it's almost hard to compare these two, and these shouldn't be compared because they are so different. But I think this one speaks to me more, and I think I like it. So I'm going to put a vote for Shakespeare in Love in this battle. So Malcolm, let's talk to you, because I know you came on here because you wanted to defend this film. Where do you stand? Are you putting a vote in Shakespeare in Love's ballot, or are you going to put it in somewhere else?
Yeah, I also think Shakespeare in Love deserved to win the over Saving Private Ryan for sure. This is because I would probably argue this is similar to to this year's Oscars when Coda beat Power of the Dogs. You've got the most technical one versus heartwarming story.
Very
It's
true.
just well, I'm not saying that Shakespeare in Love is necessarily a heartwarming story, but Saving Private Ryan is the more technical thing, and then this is the one that's outside the box. That's that kind of is just a great story in general. And honestly, I think this movie gets a lot of hate because of Saving Private Ryan for Best Picture. I don't think people really hate this movie. They just like to hate on it because it beat Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah, I think a lot of movies get hate because they win Best Picture. We're even seeing it now with Coda. We saw it with Green Book and Crash, and obviously Green Book and Crash have their own issues, but if Green Book and Crash don't win, there's a chance we say, oh, okay, yeah, that was a movie that came out, but that's where the conversation ends. But because you win Best Picture now, not only are you a film that like, oh yeah, that was a movie, but now you have to add this extra element of it won Best Picture to the conversation. Whereas I think if Crash loses to Brokeback Mountain, I don't think we even talk about Crash today. I don't think people even remember what it is.
Yeah.
And I think the same thing is true here. I think the only reason Shakespeare in Love is remembered, and this is not a knock against it, but I think the reason it is remembered and talked about still is because of the Oscar win, not necessarily because of the movie. The movie's good, but I think if it lost, it would just be kind of another one of those almost like Four Weddings and a Funeral, like a nice little rom-com that was nominated in the 90s. It didn't win, but like people love it and enjoy it, and I should check it out sometime. But now it's like you must see this to see what side of the fence you land on, because it beat the beast. It's David and Goliath. Yeah, I think that's an interesting point you make. Like a film winning Best Picture can almost be the most detrimental thing for its legacy, when in reality you want to think, oh, winning Best Picture obviously is going to be the best thing for you. But most movies their reputation is lowered because of a Best Picture win. Very rarely do you see a movie win that everyone can kind of get on board with, like Lord of the Rings or like Titanic, where everyone's like, "Yep, yo, that's the Best Picture." And even then, they have some critics. But like some of these movies, when they're smaller and they beat bigger, more technically impressive films, I guess I don't even like to say that because this is also very technically impressive. Chad, offer your insight, because it seems like we have 2 votes for Shakespeare in Love, but is there going to be a third one in this head-to-head rivalry? Not saying it's going to be necessarily be number one on your list, but in this head-to-head matchup, who wins?
Yeah. Do you want me to say who wins and then kind of get into my spiel and we'll boomerang back around?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right, cool. So yeah, I am 100%. Well, I'll say 95%. Shakespeare in Love all the way for this one, because I think, like we were said, like, Saving Private Ryan didn't win the original screenplay because that's what we had like the biggest issues with, I feel like, and so that makes sense. The acting over there was really great, cinematography, all the technical stuff was really great, and I think Malcolm nailed it with Power of the Dog versus Coda. Like, what do you like more, the more technical one or the one that's just, for a lot of people, is the better story and the more heartfelt one. And Malcolm even said, like, and he kind of was like backtracking a little bit, like, heartwarming story. I think Shakespeare in Love totally is a heartwarming story. I love the romance. I love the comedy aspect of it, and I love that Gwyneth Paltrow's character is just so in love with the theater. She'll dress like a man. She'll challenge all of the conventions. Women are not allowed to act in that theater, so she's going to dress like one so that she can, because she loves poetry, she loves acting, she loves just being in plays and just being herself, and so she has to be herself through another character she creates. And at the end of this movie, when she gets to say, "I know all the lines, I know all the words," and actually go stand in, and then like you just see the joy with her that she just is thriving in that place. It's so heartfelt, and even though they have this big romance that they don't actually end up together at the end, she's still his muse throughout like the whole thing. And I don't care that it's not historically whatever.
Well, we don't know. Yeah, because it's like it's so hard to find. Yeah, it's so hard to find that, and it's a good idea to think like, oh, maybe his plays are autobiographical to an extent. Maybe the reasons why we get Romeo and Juliet and later Twelfth Night is because of these experiences. Because Twelfth Night is about a girl going undercover as a guy. It's She's the Man is a modern interpretation of Twelfth Night, just like Romeo and Juliet. It's like the two people from opposite ends of their world kind of coming together, and I like the idea that like this was their idea of Shakespeare history, like in terms of him experiencing these things and then putting them to text. I really like that aspect.
Yeah, I love how they sprinkled all those little things. Shakespeare, like maybe that's how the ghost thing came about. He wrote about the ghost because they thought he was a ghost, and just stuff like that. And then I thought that this had maybe the best ending of all the movies in this whole slew. So it's a great film all around. I love all the performances that you listed, and I just really like this movie after rewatching it again.
It's a good feminist piece as well, because these films are predominantly male dominated. Like Thin Red Line has one woman in it, I think. Saving Private Ryan, I don't even know if it has one, like or a main character at least. And then Life is Beautiful. Yes, it's a love story, but it's only for half of it. The next half, she's almost kind of not there for a lot of it. So it's nice that this is a movie that like is kind of the opposite. It's about like, well, this is a man's world. Like men were playing the women parts in Shakespeare plays because it was seen as taboo to have women performing on stage. And this is kind of like showing that like, no, we can accept all types of people on stage. And I like that, like, this is the reason why now we have women on stage, which is obviously not the case. Like, this is not a perfect portrayal of history, but again, this is a fantasy. This is a love story. This is a fairy tale to an extent. And I like how they kind of like bend history and kind of create their own revisionist history of Shakespeare's love life and all that stuff, because it is very endearing to see. I'll admit, I enjoy this every time I watch it. I didn't enjoy this as much as the first time I watched it. I think because the first time I watched it, I was like, oh my God, people hate this thing? It's great. And I think now I'm just like, oh yeah, no, it's very, very sweet. It's very, very good. I think there are maybe one or two films I would put above it, not to spoil my ranking, but I do still really like this more than Saving Private Ryan, because I think it is more easily digestible. It is more my cup of tea. I hate that phrase, but it is much more my cup of tea. Malcolm, do you have anything else to say?
Yeah, I mean, like with Shakespeare in Love, I just love how they sort of played with the whole idea that that was that Shakespeare didn't write any of his own material; it was all his just stolen from Marlowe.
Yeah.
And it's just so, I mean, that's probably going to be something they're going to probably throw into anything Shakespeare related going forward. It's like, did he actually write his stuff? No one will even actually truly know that. It's not like you can just ring up Shakespeare and go, hey, you stole that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like how they kind of make Shakespeare out to be this flawed person, because he's not just this, like, knight in shining armor guy. No, he is kind of the scrappier writer. He enjoys the fame of being Shakespeare. Like, he's kind of a dick at times, but I think it works. And I think Joseph Fiennes plays that well, to where you still understand why he falls in love with Viola and why they connect, but also you understand, like, no, he's Shakespeare. He's kind of got an ego, and I like that. I like kind of giving him more character than just this one note, like, genius person, like, that cannot be touched because he's holy and sacred. Like, it's sacred. It's very different. It's a very interesting portrayal of a character that we all know parts of, but we don't really know. Like, it's weird. It's like almost like a myth in a way, even though we know he existed. It is essentially a myth. And one last thing before we move on, there is talk that Harvey Weinstein basically bought the win. By campaigning and sending gifts and money and all that stuff. There have been some confirmations of that, and I do think it's a disservice to everyone who did put their hearts into this movie to just be knocked off as, well, you only won because of this or that. I do think they're generally fans. Now, did it win because of campaigning? Very much could have. It very well could have. And I think maybe it did. But I also think, just by discussing it, we all kind of agree that it has its own merits as a film outside of the campaigning, outside of all the dirty behind the scenes stuff. And I honestly hate that, because that's, I think, what taints its legacy. And I just wanted to bring that up because I do think it's worth mentioning that,
I almost did bring it up, and I
yeah. I didn't want to mention his name, but I did feel like I had to, because that is why most people say it did win. But I do think,
for sure,
it did have fans, even with or without the campaigning, and it could have won regardless. It's Shakespeare in Love, nominated for 13 Oscars, which is the most nominations of the day. So maybe people did see it coming more than they'd like to let on, and it wins 7 awards. It's nominated for Best Sound, Best Makeup, Best Film Editing, Best Cinematography, Best Supporting Actor for Jeffrey Rush, and Best Director for John Madden. It wins Best Original Score, Comedy Score, Best Costume Design, Best Art Direction, Best Screenplay Original, Best Supporting Actress for Judi Dench, Best Actress for Gwyneth Paltrow, and Best Picture.
Yeah, the last thing I'll actually add is, did Judi Dench win, or at least was nominated for an Oscar for playing Queen Victoria the year earlier for Mrs. Brown?
I believe she was nominated, yes.
Yeah, so I do find it funny that this is the Queen she wins for in a year which had another Queen Elizabeth lose. I mean,
Yes,
in my
very
opinion,
true.
both Queen Elizabeth should have won, because I think Kate Blanchett was better than Gwyneth Paltrow in Shakespeare in Love. But that being said, I think it would have it had to have been a close race between those two for sure. Because the other 3 names, I don't really remember those movies.
Very interesting, just the Judi Dench win, because people also like to hate on that because they're like, she's in 10 minutes, but it is a supporting actress. She's supporting the main narrative. And while I don't think it should have necessarily gone to her, I don't think she's one of the strongest winners in that category we've seen. I still think she's very good in the movie. I mean, she's got some great moments.
I mean, Anthony Hopkins was in less time in Silence of the Lambs, and he still
That's true, and that was lead, not supporting. Yeah, it just goes to show. Sometimes a year will be in your favor where you're not necessarily going up against the best competition, or you are, and you just happen to really just resonate with voters. I mean, it's really interesting how the Academy works. It's a very thin margin sometimes, a very thin line, if you will. Speaking of, let's talk about the Thin Red Line, the final film in this lineup. This lineup. Chad, tell us about the Thin Red Line.
Absolutely. The Thin Red Line, directed by the great Terrence Malick, written by the great Terrence Malick, cinematography by John Toll, music by the great Hans Zimmer, starring Sean Penn, Adrian Brody, Jim Caviezel, Ben Chaplin, George Clooney, John Cusack, Woody Harrelson, Elias Koteas, Jared Leto. Yes, Jared Leto is in this. Dash Mihawk, Tim Blake Nelson, Nick Nolte, John C. Reilly. Yes, John C. Reilly's in this. John Savage, John Travolta, and Ari Varveen. I forgot the name that she called him that one.
Before you move on, Chad, I just want to say I did not know Jared Leto was in this until I saw his name in the credits and rewound it and went, "Oh, that is Jared Leto." So
yes, no, I noticed him right away. I was like,
"What?" I didn't even
think
think about it.
Urban legend around Jared Leto. Fight Club.
Miranda Otto also had a small role in this too.
Synopsis: I don't really have much here. It's just a fictionalized version of the Battle of Mount Austin. A
Yeah.
lot of things happen in this movie,
Mhm.
and it's based on The Thin Red Line by James Jones.
Yeah, it's very interesting because like this is our third World War II film we're talking about, but they're all so different. You know, one is like, the Holocaust specifically. Another, and even more specifically, Italian Jews in the Holocaust. This next film, Saving Private Ryan, is about a mission in World War II to rescue someone from a camp. This is, its own whole other breed of storytelling, and that's why I like how all three of them are in the same lineup because they can all be compared, but they're all so different all at once. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So Chad, I'm actually going to start with you because I know you
Okay.
really like this one. So why don't you tell us about your thoughts on this movie? Because this was a first watch for me, and I'm interested to hear what your thoughts were since you have seen this multiple times before.
Yep, this is definitely a second watch for me. I love Terrence Malick. I think he's one of the greatest filmmakers of all time because he's an auteur. He just takes just everything and just makes it. Just the way he makes films is like he'll just shoot. When there's something he knows he wants to capture, he'll just shoot. Like all of the little scenes of like nature and animals and creatures and stuff just around. It's just freaking beautiful. He knows how to work with his cinematographers and almost be a cinematographer himself and take every little aspect. Like he wrote this, he directed this, and just basically did everything except for the music. I just think just everything he does in this kind of invents shots and just, works with it. And just this is why all of these actors are so clamoring to be in his movies. And I know there's a lot of people who try to detract from Terrence Malick, and he's not everybody's taste.
Because it's
I
such
know
a
that
distinct style. It's so
exactly,
different. Yeah.
and I know that me and you really love the Tree of Life. I don't know exactly how you feel about this one too, but like I know that a lot of these films are very divisive, and I know this one gets shoved under the rug, and I think it's a very big shame because the conversation's so much Shakespeare in Love and Saving Private Ryan that I think this movie is one of the best movies ever made, especially about war.
Yeah.
And because it's not showy like a Saving Private Ryan, it's not something where it's like we're going to tell you what this movie's about. It's like, no, we're just going to show things happening, and you have to understand what the themes are.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does narration, but I love the way Terrence Malick does narration because it's always like just someone's inner monologue and just someone's, it's
Yeah.
poetry basically.
Yeah, it's
And
not
I
like
love
someone's telling a story. It's just we're hearing what they're thinking in their head rather than, and then I did
it's
this,
like
and then I did this. Yeah.
just like narration about evil, like what is this evil?
Yeah.
What is this going? And it's just like an inner monologue. I just love it so much. And just some of the notes that I took, I said a great war movie is anti-war. The shot with the dead Japanese soldier buried in the dirt with narration was just so deep, and the way that he just like lingers on that face, just showing this is what humanity is capable of.
Yeah.
Like I know it's complex, it's a world war, there's so many things going on. These people did this, these people did that, we got to do this now because of thing like there's a Holocaust happening, there's just so many things happening, terrible evils, but that doesn't mean that we get to go do terrible evils.
Yeah, I've only seen this once. Actually, it was going to rewatch it this week, but just ran out of time. Like it's a good movie. I like probably like out of the war movies, this is probably my second favorite out of the three. But that being said, it was great. Like I had no idea about Terrence Malick going in. This is probably the first one movie I've seen. But one thing I will say, this is a stat cast. It feels like they all auditioned to be in Saving Private Ryan, and they're all rejected. Like Terrence Malick's like, "Hey, you still want to be in a war movie? I'll come over here. I've got ones like it's happening in World War II as well." It's just the random assortment of cast like Ben Affleck, Jared Leto. It's just this is just one that I did enjoy enough. I didn't hate it. Maybe when we rewatch it, I might get a little bit more out of it. But it's just one of those ones that for first time watch, it's just one that didn't do any impact on me, but it's also not terrible.
Yeah,
I do have to say, I
yeah.
do want to add real quick because I think Malcolm makes a really great point. This happened to me too. When I watched it the second time, that's when I started to understand a lot more of the themes and things that
Right.
were going on. I think that's because Terrence Malick is a really good, like layered,
Yeah.
like he just makes movies that you need
Mhm.
to, I'll
Yeah.
let Dylan go because I know
You
he
know,
hasn't gone.
I think this is just so interesting because I've seen two Malick films. One I adore, one I really don't like at all, and that's I even forget the name of it. It's the one with
Haven't
Ryan
seen it.
Gosling. Anyway,
Mhm.
I think this one takes the best of Malick's style, but makes it even more accessible, I think, than A Tree of Life. Like, I think it really is something that is entertaining in its war sequences, like where I actually was intrigued to see how it was all going down. Like I think it does have a lot of the showiness that Saving Private Ryan has, but it doesn't necessarily feel like the sake of showiness. It feels almost like it still has some sort of relevance to the overall theming and story because this is a story that is much more character perspective forward rather than plot forward. And I like that about Malick's
Mhm.
films. I like how
Yes.
it's all about the characters in these moments because not a lot happens in this movie in terms of like they don't really travel a ton. Like they're mostly in one or two locations the whole movie. A lot of the time they're just sitting on that hill, but it's about every single mindset going through. And it's kind of like that idea of Saving Private Ryan, where the person you think might be the main character ends up dying in like 2 seconds. This is similar, not in the fact that everyone dies, but in the fact that you really don't have one main character. Everyone gets their own perspective told to where like I feel like this movie covers every single personal way you could be feeling in that moment due
Absolutely.
to all the different perspectives. That being said, I do think Saving Private Ryan at least has more focus in terms of like it has a protagonist and an actual story beginning, middle, end. Here it feels a little aimless at times to where like the second hour into the third hour dragged a little bit to me, but then again it gets you at the end with its themes and with its like just overall perspective on war and just the human psyche and all that kind of introspective stuff that we don't necessarily see in war films. We usually see a series of events. This is more of a series of thoughts, a series of ideas, a series of themes. I love how beautiful it is because I think one of the best things that Malick does is juxtaposing the horrors of war with the beauty of the jungles that is
Yes.
going on. Like you see this crocodile swimming through this moss, and it's like moss and crocodiles, it's icky, but it's also gorgeous to see. Like all these images are so beautiful to where when you see the destruction, it only impacts the horrible nature of what's going on even more because it's like, wow, how could something this beautiful be so tainted by all this stuff? Like you look at these blades of grass and it's all so beautiful, but then the camera pans down, you see all these heads bobbing through the blades of grass, and it's basically like this beautiful Mother Nature's earth that is being slowly infected by this horrible stuff that's going on, this fighting and this violence, and these people
That's
disagreeing and this battle, and it's really amazing to see that juxtaposition with the imagery, the gorgeous imagery, with the harsh, heartbreaking stuff going on in the middle. I think it's a beautiful mix and a beautiful marriage to where I want to watch this again to get more out of it because I think pacing wise, his films are purposely slow, and sometimes you can fall off of that if you're not 100% clued in, zoned into it. And I think at times I was a little out of it, but I think in terms of getting the overall perspective of war through and the mindset of a soldier in this time, I think it does it a little more successfully than Saving Private Ryan, where Saving Private Ryan probably captures this series of events and probably tells a more like entertaining and digestible story. I think they're each powerful and important for their own reasons, but I do think this is a little bit better. I think this is better in that sense, and I really do enjoy it. And I think as my second Malick film that I love, like I'm excited to keep exploring his work because I don't know
yes.
if this is his most palatable, or if it gets even more palatable from here, or if it gets even weirder and more metaphorical as it goes on. I don't care, but I'm excited to check it out because he is such an intriguing filmmaker that I just can't wait to see it.
Dylan, I think you hit it right on the nose when you just talk about the juxtaposition between the beautiful nature and the sad like destruction, the
Mm-hmm.
stuff that humanity does
Mm-hmm.
to this beautiful thing that we're
Yeah.
given. And I think you hit that right on the
Yeah.
nose, and you hit it right on the nose saying about all the perspectives. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, it's just because I think this movie is art. But
Mm-hmm.
also, I think it's because Terrence Malick does have, like you said, that really specific style that either you get it, you love it. I'm not saying if you don't get it,
Yeah. Yeah.
you just don't get it. I'm not like saying that. I'm just saying like, if you understand what he's trying to do and like what he's trying to do, then you can like really dive in,
Yep.
and the slowness you can kind of like be like, you can love it, like the narration, everything you can
Yeah.
love. But if you want something that's more of like just a story, then
Yeah.
you're probably going to like Saving Private Ryan a little more. I agree, but I sway this other way.
Yeah. So Thin Red Line nominated for 7 Oscars: Best Picture, Director, Screenplay, Adapted Screenplay, Cinematography, Film Editing, Original Drama Score by Hans Zimmer, and Best Sound. It does not win a single thing. So it is our only film that we're talking about that didn't win any Oscars. And I think it just has to do with Terrence Malick is an acquired taste. And I think it's enough to get nominated by the different branches. But when the whole of the Academy's voting, maybe his movies just don't resonate as much. I don't know. I guess we'll never know the reasoning. And because, again, it's going up against 2 other war films, which I don't think helps it. I think it honestly hurts any movie when there's another movie just like it. I think it's why we only got 1 musical nominated in 2022 when there were so many good musicals this year. It's because I think there were just so many musicals that it got vote splitting and whatever. So now getting on to the last thing we do on the show, it is ranking these nominees, picking our winner of the 3 of us, and then, of course, picking an actor and actress from these films. I know we got to speed this up a little bit, so I'm just going to get right into it. My number 5 is Elizabeth. Chad, what is your number 5?
My number 5 is also Elizabeth. Great film, but yeah, the other ones work for me more.
And Malcolm, what is your number 5?
Life is Beautiful.
Okay. Sorry, I just need to jot that down. So, 5. All right. My number 4 is Saving Private Ryan. Chad?
My number 4 is also Saving Private Ryan.
Malcolm?
It's also Saving Private Ryan.
There you go.
Ooh, nice.
My number 3 is The Thin Red Line. Chad?
This one is the hardest one for me. I have 2 that I'm juggling. I'm just going to say my number 3 is Life is Beautiful.
All right. And Malcolm, your number 3?
The Thin Red Line.
All right. My number 2 is Shakespeare in Love. Chad?
My number 2 is also Shakespeare in Love.
Malcolm?
My number 2 is Elizabeth.
All right. And my number 1 is Life is Beautiful. Chad, what is your number 1?
The Thin Red Line.
And that means Malcolm's number 1 is
Shakespeare in Love.
And with that,
Nice.
Shakespeare in Love is number 2, and number 1, which means Shakespeare in Love is our best picture for 1998. Didn't have to do any crazy math there.
Well deserving, I think.
Yeah, very well deserving. We ended up lining up with the Academy, which we've only done a few other times with Nomadland, Coda, and The Sting, I believe. So this will be, I think, our 4th that we've lined up with the Academy perfectly in terms of picking the same Best Picture winner. So now moving on to our Best Actors and Actresses. I believe, Chad, you are first with Best Actor today. So why don't you take us away and tell us who your Best Actor is?
So I feel like I've crapped on Saving Private Ryan a little too much. Like I wanted to talk a lot about the things that I do like because I do really like a lot about that movie. I have issues, but there's a lot to love. There's a reason people love to watch this movie, and also sometimes hate to watch this movie because of the dark things that happen. My number 1 actor is Tom Hanks. No, it's not. It's actually Giovanni Ribisi.
Wow,
He is
what a
my
great pick.
favorite part of Saving Private Ryan, just because in this movie, like this character, he's just a medic, but he cares so much. He's probably one of the smartest people in the entire platoon or whatever their troop. He's there in the D-Day scene fixing people, and then he's there, going on the thing. And he's actually the nice one. I think he actually engages with I call him Faraday because of Lost, but the one guy who's scared and he's the journalist. And then you get that one scene that I absolutely love is his kind of monologue where he talks about his home life, and he talks about his mother. I think she was a single mother and she worked nights. Sometimes she'd get off early and she just wants to come home and hear about his day.
Yeah.
And then he pretended to be asleep and he just questions, I don't know why I did that. Like he could have had more time with his mom, and he just it's one of his life's regrets.
Yeah.
Now that he's in war, he doesn't know if he's going to make it. And he's just like, I could have spent more time with my mom if I would have made different choices. And we just all probably would have those same regrets. And it just hits me deep at the deepest of any part of Saving Private Ryan. And then you get to his death scene. And that scene is just so strong because I feel like he's selling that. Like that death scene is one of the best death scenes I've ever seen, where he's just like, oh, is it my this one part of me, because he's the medic, and they're like, help me save you, I don't know how to save
Right.
you, tell me what to do. And he's just like, I could use a little more morphine. And then you're like, he's kind of given up because he just
Yeah.
doesn't know how, and he knows he's done, and it's just so heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Giovanni Ribisi.
Yeah, great pick. My pick. I thought you were going to take my pick, so I'm glad you didn't. And that is Tom Hanks in Saving Private Ryan. He is one of my favorite actors. I really do love him. I love Roberto Benigni and Life is Beautiful, but I also think he's a better director than he is actor. Not to say he's a bad actor, but I do think his direction is stronger than his acting there. Tom Hanks just brings it here. Again, I mean, he's Tom Hanks. He does everything really well. So I think he is really great in this film. I like how he was a focal point, whereas like Thin Red Line, I was waiting for one character to kind of be the main focus. I like how it was more of an ensemble effort, but here I do think Giovanni Ribisi is terrific. But Tom Hanks for me is a great focal point for that movie. Just really sells the movie for me and makes it better than if he was not in it. Like I think if he was not in it, maybe I'd like it even less. But I think the reason it works when it works for me is because of him.
I love the part when he's listening to Ryan, but then he's also like, they're like, you know, so tell us about your wife or what. He's like, that one's for me.
Yeah, it's almost like Captain America at the end when of Endgame when they ask, "Oh, you're going to tell me about the ring?" and he's like, "I don't think I will," because it's his moment.
Yeah.
And I will say, I wonder if that was copied from Saving Private Ryan. I also wonder if the Avengers theme was copied after this movie because the music sounds similar at times to the Captain America theme music wise. But I'm not going to say Alan Silvestri copied anything. But Malcolm, who's your best actor?
I'm going to go Joseph Fiennes for Shakespeare in Love because I think he was really great at that. I don't think he was even nominated, which was weird.
No, and that's another thing too. I think people don't love that performance for some reason. And I don't understand it. I really, really like the performance.
Yeah.
I don't know why he's not a bigger star than he was in this year. I really don't. Because he had a twofer. He had Elizabeth and Shakespeare in Love. Malcolm, you do have the first pick for actress. So again, it has to be from one of these 5 films. But you can say who it would have been otherwise. But yeah, tell us who your actress pick is.
Well, I was actually like, I would have gone out of the box and gone Reese Witherspoon for Pleasantville, personally. But this is actually really easy for me because I think I might have spoiled it earlier when talking about the specific movie. But Cate Blanchett for Elizabeth.
Yeah, that was my pick too. It's a great performance, yeah, and it's fairly early in her career too, which is even more impressive, I think, because like she wasn't this huge established name yet. She hadn't done Lord of the Rings or The Aviator or anything like that yet. So
she sells that arc really well. I love her.
Yeah. My best actress, backup because Malcolm took mine. I'm gonna pick her. I'm gonna pick Gwyneth Paltrow. I think she, while I definitely would have gone with Cate Blanchett, I think Gwyneth Paltrow is still very good in this movie. I think she plays. She doesn't play a good man, but she's not supposed to. But I like her naivete, but also just the way she stands up for herself at the end and the way she does commit to the romance and the comedy and all the ins and outs and in betweens. Chad, who is your best actress pick? I know we took 2 of them out of the way for you, so you're gonna have to. I'm curious to see if this is a backup or if this was your first choice or not.
This is definitely my third backup because you guys took my 1 and 2. My 1 would have been Gwyneth Paltrow for damn sure. I love her in that movie. I love her, that end scene, as I said, with her basically loving being in that performance and knowing all the lines and stuff. But my actress, I was wondering, I was like, who do I pick? Like Mrs. Ryan? Like, who do I pick? And then I went, you know what? Who gives like great performance that I've only seen like negative performances from her is fucking Imelda Staunton.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's the nurse.
Shakespeare in Love. She is hilarious in Shakespeare in Love. Really I love all of the stuff in the beginning, like when they're having their little romance, and then she's outside just like waiting patiently for it to happen, but she's so awkward. And then she's like, "Can I come in, please?" And then at the end, when she finally gets to see Viola act in the play, she's crying. She's just like reacting so like crazy and. She's just amazing, and I didn't know that side of Dolores Umbridge.
That's a great pick. I also love how like she's the character that inspired the nurse in Romeo and Juliet, who then inspired Anita in West Side Story, and we have had both Rita Moreno and Ariana DeBose win in our picture this awards as well. So this is like the 3rd nurse from Romeo and Juliet that has won this award. So that's great. So to recap, our best picture for 1998 is Shakespeare in Love. Chad's best actor is Giovanni Ribisi. His best actress is Imelda Staunton. My best actor is Tom Hanks. My best actress is Gwyneth Paltrow. Malcolm's best actor is Joseph Fiennes, and his best actress is Cate Blanchett. 6 great performances, 5 good, ranging on great films, depending on how you view them. Malcolm, any closing thoughts, and where can they find you?
Yeah, I mean, like closing thoughts, just simply like despite what I think about more movies and foreign movies, these were 5 good movies, regardless. But yeah, you can find me over on Take 3 Productions, the host of Rankum every Saturday. I'm not sure when this is going up, but yeah, the next episode is going to be for us for a couple of movies. Many of which I'm watching for the first time for that.
Nice.
But yeah, and find me on Full Metal Host Trivia. So
awesome. Next month, we are transitioning away from the 90s and into the early 2010s because yet again we are doing a 10-year retrospective on the channel, meaning I'm going to be looking at all the films that happened 10 years ago in 2012, looking at some of them for the 100th time, looking at some of them for the first or second time to see how they've changed over the 10 years and just to see my thoughts on them. And you can find all that primarily on my Letterboxd, but there may be a few videos. I know Frame Wreck this month will be Battleship, which will pertain to the 2012 year. We're going to do something about the Avengers on Marvelous Movie Monday, so we're going to kind of tie it in on the channel, but this show specifically will be about the Best Picture nominees of 2012. Those films that came out 10 years ago, I can't believe I'm saying this, are Amour, Argo, Beasts of the Southern Wild, Django Unchained, Les Miserables, Life of Pi, Lincoln, Silver Linings Playbook, and Zero Dark 30. So that is the lineup for next month. It's going to be a
moving from
excited
the
for that one.
moving from the of one Les Miserables to another Les Mis.
Yes.
I
So,
like
so
the
the
way they
exact
moved.
the exact time jump from 1 year of Les Mis to another year of Les Mis, one with a little bit more vocals and a lot less Liam Neeson, a lot more Russell Crowe. So we'll be talking about that next month for sure. Chad, where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm all around. Letterboxd, Chadwick Webb. I have my own channel now. I do ranking stuff. Not as great as Rankum. I'm trying, but we did Edgar Wright, we did Christmas, we did Harry Potter. We're trying to get a Denis Villeneuve out because he's great. Dune's great. And yeah, I'm here, and then I'm also over in movie battleground sphere over at TMG. I'll do a lot of trivia. Dylan and I are gonna be on Ontel Teams at one point, which is was a really fun match to play in. I don't know when that's going up, but we're looking to get our teams game up with the trivia again, and I'm very excited for that. Yeah, I think that's about it for me for right now.
And you can find me here at the channel.
Have
All the
fun.
socials are down below on the in the bio. So yeah, go follow us all over the place and check out all the other shows. We got Draft Day just happened earlier this week, which is really, really fun. Check that out and vote on the poll. If you want to go to the Dill Pickle Movie Network page on Facebook, it's links to the group, and you can just vote for your favorite draft of those drafts. Anyway, thank you so much, Malcolm, for joining us. Thank you so much, Chad, as always. And we'll see you next month for 2012.